Right, hello everybody. So thank you for coming back again, and we're going on with the ABC series that we started. So as you know, we're up to L, so up to the letter L. Now, there was a few options for the letter L, but in the end I opted for more of a phrase than a word. So it's not quite just a word, it's a whole little phrase, and the little phrase is L for love. But I won't stop there. L for love one another, because that seems to be a common message that both scriptures, Bhagavad Gita and Bible, are promoting. Love one another. So I'd like to introduce to you a little bit of a logic chain. So if we just try to think really logically through this. So there's three links in the chain. So the first link would be, link one would be, we are told to love God. We must love God. Right, so if we accept that instruction in the scriptures, then it leads to a second logic link in the logic chain. And the second logic link, which we can prove with quotes, is, but we are part of God. Right, so I think you can see where this is heading. So link one, we must love God. Link two, the living entities are part of God. So obviously and logically, link three then says we have to love other living entities in order to love God. So those are the three kind of links in the chain, and I thought I would do each link separately with relevant quotes. So if we go to the first link on the instruction, the requirement to love God, love Krishna, then if we look for some supporting quotes on that, what we find is Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse or text 26, where we are giving an instruction on offering things to the Lord. And generally people think of the offerings as opulent things like beautiful food. That is a very big thing in the Bhagavad Gita, the offering of the food to the Lord, and that sort of spiritualizes the food because the Lord has now mystically tasted the food. And the thing to remember with the Lord is that he sees everything that we see because he's in us as a super soul, and he doesn't need to actually have a tongue with taste buds to taste things. All his senses can do all the jobs. So that would mean that you could taste with your eyes instead of with needing to have a mouth. So through his spiritual eyes, the Lord can just look at the food and somehow conjure up the taste, and that means the Lord has accepted it, and that means the food has become sort of sanctified and or made holy, spiritualized, and then it's called prasadam, and then it's really, really spiritually beneficial to do that before you eat the food. And in the Christian tradition, people say grace before they eat the food. So normally when one does the sacrifices to the Lord, one thinks of sacrificing big things like garlands of beautiful flowers and lovely meals that you've cooked. But the Lord actually sets us right on that. And Krishna says in this Bhagavad Gita, verse 9, text 26, if one offers me with love and devotion, and that's when Krishna goes on to say basically it can be just water. It can just be a leaf. It doesn't have to be a great big fancy thing, just a water, a leaf, and he will accept it. But the big proviso is if one offers me with love. So he's asking us to offer things with love, not out of fear or just duty, but with love. And then in chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, verse 10, Krishna says, to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me, by serving me with love. So again, he's asking for our love. And, you know, we have the same thing in the Bible. We are told in the Bible, you must love, in Mark chapter 12, verse 29, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your being and with all your mind. So both scriptures are asking us, the Lord God, Krishna, is asking for our love. So in terms of the first link of the chain, yes, we are meant to love Krishna. The scriptures ask us to do that. We should love God. Okay, so then let's move to the second link in the chain. The second link that says, but we are parts of God. And as I've spoken before about, that if God is the most ginormous ocean, then we are each a little drop out of that ocean. So we have the same qualities as God. The qualities that God has, we have. But the quantity is not the same, obviously, but we have the same qualities because we are part of that giant ocean. Or if God is a huge, ginormous, eternal furnace, we are little sparks out of that furnace. So a spark has the same nature as a fire, but obviously in the diminutive form. So we are part of him. This has been covered before in the ABC series. But let's just sort of refresh that part about we are part of God. We emanate from God. Bhagavad Gita chapter 13 verse 18 tells us that he is the source of light in all luminous objects. And then there's some other stuff, and then it ends on, he is situated in everyone's heart. So God is definitely along with us. Bhagavad Gita chapter 13 verse 28, one who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, not human bodies only, by the way. One who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul. So they're like a twosome. Our individual soul, which is a spark of the furnace, and the super soul, which is that part of God which also comes with us through thick and thin and is everywhere with us, but is different to our individual soul and has far greater consciousness than our individual soul does. When it's, you know, our individual soul in the body has forgotten so much, but the super soul never does. So one who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the super soul within this destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. So one who sees all that is actually seeing the truth. They actually see what the situation is. One who sees, verse 29, that's the very next verse. One who sees the super soul equally present everywhere, in every living being. Then some other stuff approaches the transcendental destination. Well, the transcendental destination is to transcend matter, to transcend the material world, and to go back to the spiritual home. See, transcendental's got a bit of a bad rap or a bad vibe to it because it's a word that was used, I think, in the hippie era, in the 70s maybe, and with all the people taking the hallucinogenic drugs to get these wonderful visions, and they'd say, oh, it's all transcendental, I'm now in the spiritual realm. Well, probably it was just all a drug-induced hallucination. So then transcendental kind of got muddled up in the minds of people with hippies and drugs and hallucinations. But transcendental just means to transcend or to go above, to go beyond. So if we want to approach the transcendental destination, it means going above and beyond the material realm back to the spiritual. So we are told that one who sees the super soul equally present everywhere in every living being can approach the transcendental destination. So again, it doesn't say in the Bhagavad Gita in every human or in every in every man or woman. It says in every living being. So every living being has a soul, is a soul, just in a different body. So then in Bhagavad Gita, still on the idea of we are part of the Lord, Bhagavad Gita chapter 15 verse 7, the living entities in this conditioned world, because we've all been conditioned by material existence to think that we're this body and to behave in certain ways. So the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts, eternal fragmental parts of the Lord, eternal fragments of the Lord, eternal sparks of the furnace, eternal droplets out of the ocean. So we definitely are fragmental parts of the Lord, but the Lord is not finite. So you can fragment the Lord into fragmental parts, or he can fragment himself into fragmental parts, zillions and zillions, innumerable, infinite number of times, and never diminish the original. Now, we're conditioned by the material world, because in the material world, that's not possible. Generally, in the material world, if you have a big bucket of water and you have to partition it out, even drop by drop, eventually you'll run out of water. And even our oceans on Earth, if we had enough time and one could go drop by drop by drop, eventually, in millions and millions and millions of years, we would run out of the oceans, because they have a finite volume and a finite capacity. Probably the closest material analogy to this idea would be a candle. A candle's a good one, because you can take a candle and you can light many, many, many other candles from that first original candle. But the first original flame will always stay looking the same. You won't know when you look at the flame whether it's lit one other candle off itself or it's lit 100 other candles off itself. All you have to do is hold the candle that you want to light in the flame of the first candle, and it will be lit. And it won't affect the first candle. It'll still have its same original flame structure and quality. So that's probably the best example of the Lord being able to fragment himself into innumerable fragmental parts, i.e. individual souls, which then go into various bodies around various universes and various worlds. So we are told clearly the living entities, that's the animals as well, the living entities. He never, ever, ever in Bhagavad Gita only restricts it to humans. The living entities in this world are my eternal fragmental parts. And Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 verse 20, I am the beginning, the middle and the end of all beings. Beings, notice, not humans. All beings, I am the beginning, the middle and the end. So the Lord is definitely where we get our souls from. So we are part of the Lord. And in that way, he is part of us, because he has given us our soul as a part of himself. And then there's the super soul accompanying, which is a part of himself. Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 verse 8, the Lord says, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. So I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. So he is the source. He is the big ocean. He is the giant furnace. He is where we get our soul from. So the soul that is my individual jiva soul came originally from that giant ocean, that giant furnace. And in the Bible, they don't go into the detail that Bhagavad Gita does, but in 1 John chapter 4 verses 12 and 13, partial quotes because it can get quite long, we are told God lives in us. We live in him and he in us. We live in him and he in us. So let's take it as a given then that the second chain link has been verified by scripture, that we are part of God. So the first chain link, that we must love God, we've got quotes to that effect, that we should love Krishna. The second chain link, that our individual souls are part of God, has been verified. So we move on to the third chain link, which is pure logic. You can see if we're supposed to love God and then our individual souls are part of God because they've come from God, then we'd have to love each other in order to love God. So that's the third link in the chain. So if we were to look at Bhagavad Gita again, chapter 12, verse 14 or text 14, one who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities. Such a devotee is very dear to me. So, a kind friend to all living entities. Again, not all humans. So, hence why people who follow the Bhagavad Gita don't kill animals and eat meat, because this instruction to be a kind friend to all living entities, such a devotee is very dear to me. So that makes the Lord very happy when we are kind to all living entities. Again, he tells us in chapter 12, verse 18 to 19, one who is equal to friends and enemies is very dear to me. Equal to friends and enemies. Treat friends and enemies the same. So if you love your friends, you should love your enemies too, if you're going to be equal to them. So I'll explain later how one can do this, because not that I've succeeded, but one must strive to do this. And there is a trick that helps significantly with trying to follow that instruction. Bhagavad Gita chapter 13 verse 31 says, when a sensible man ceases to see different identities due to different material bodies, he attains the Brahman conception. The Brahman conception is one of the three levels of knowing God. Knowing God present everywhere in everything, in nature, in the wind, in the power of the waves, in the beauty of flowers, in every living entity that you come in contact with, and not just living entities. God is in every atom, so we are told in the Vedic scriptures. But certainly ceases to see different identities due to different material bodies. So, that includes all material bodies, not just human ones, but we do tend to see different souls in different ways according to the body in which they are presently entombed or presently being carried. We do see things differently, but with our eyes, the body is different, so we judge differently, we assess differently. The Lord wants us to stop that. When a sensible man ceases or stops seeing different identities due to different material bodies, then he attains the Brahman conception, which is actually the lowest, the least intimate conception of knowing the Lord. Then the next step up in intimacy, as I've mentioned before in another talk, is to know the super soul within your own heart and to have a personal relationship with the super soul. And then the hardest and sort of topmost level of knowing the Lord is to read about, know about, understand the spiritual world, the Lord's spiritual form, and what the Lord gets up to. And those are mentioned and explained in the Vedas, because the Vedas go into a lot of detail about these things. So, so definitely we are being told to see other entities equally and treat them equally, as equal as we treat our friends and family. And in the Bible, 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 to 8, let us love one another. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. So we must love one another, and if we don't love, we don't know God. We can't say we love God if we can't love one another. And in a little bit further along, still in chapter 4 there, verse 21, if anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. And he has given us this command: whoever loves God must also love his brother. So Jesus came among the people and said, yes, the greatest commandment is to love God, but I give you another first commandment: love one another as you love yourself. So clearly, this love is not just the way we understand love, because we have so much throwing around of the word love. It's used very lightly these days. It's in all the pop songs. People use it for inane things like, I love chocolate cake. I mean, I'm guilty of saying that. I love fudge. Oh, I love Russian fudge the most. So we've sort of devalued the meaning of the word love somewhat. And then you've got the romantic love, and you've got the Valentine's cards love, and you've got the love for your pets, and you've got the love for your children. And there's so many different types of love being bandied about. But when we get down to it, if we love God, we will love automatically all the loving entities, and that would be the end of war. We'd have peace. We'd have real peace on earth. So the way to get, as Prabhupada has said over and over in his books, Prabhupada, who brought this wisdom to us from the Vedic Sanskrit, there would be no more problems in the world. There'd be no more hunger. There'd be no more war and violence and crime if we could just obey this one thing: to love each other, because by doing that we're loving God. If we could just do that, then all the problems would be gone. We wouldn't want to see people be starving. We'd make sure they weren't. So, yeah, in the chain of three, there's plenty quotes to back up that idea. So, if we go further down the track of like, all right, so say we assume that we accept that we must love one another in order to love God properly, then one could ask, well, what part am I meant to love? What part must I love in all these strangers out there? Let's just stick to humans for now, although as I've made clear, it's not just about humans. But what part should I love? The human for his physical body, the appearance? Many people do love for that reason, purely for that reason. Should I love for the personality? Should I love for the mind? Like, what aspect are you instructing me to love? Because we all know it's pretty impossible to love everybody in the normal sense of the way we love our family. Because that would be really hard to love someone with a horrible personality who's always rude and abrasive and violent and unkind. And, well, you wouldn't want to love that person. But we must, because that's the instruction we've been given if we want to go back to the spiritual home. But I'll give you a story that the Vedas talk about. The Vedas say it's pointless watering individual leaves on a tree. I mean, in reality, if you want to get the water to all the leaves on this tree, you really only need to focus your water in one spot, don't you? And that's water the root of the tree. If you water the root of the tree, automatically all the leaves will get the sustenance of the water. And so the point we're trying to get to here is, if you love the Lord, if you genuinely love Krishna, love God, love the Lord, then he's like the root of the tree, since everything emanates from him. So if he's the root of the tree, then you automatically would love all those parts of him that's in all those individual living entities, wouldn't you? It would be like the tree example. We know on the material plane, if we put water on the root, then all the leaves are going to get water. So if we could genuinely love the Lord, genuinely love God, it would be automatic that we would also be loving all the little parts of God, which are scattered all around about in individual living entities. But still, even if we know that, it's still really it's really a big ask, especially in this modern world when there's so much bad things going on and cheaters and criminals and violence and awful behaviors. Then you think, well, this is just impossible. I can't love that person. I can't love that person. How am I supposed to love someone like Hitler? But so I'll tell you the trick now. I did promise you the trick, and this helps me a lot. Let's take a material example. Let's think about light bulbs and lampshades. So imagine all these light bulbs, and they're all white light, just pure white light that comes out of these light bulbs. But then around the light bulbs, we've got glass lampshades. Now, the glass lampshades come in coloured forms. It's contaminated. It's not clear glass. So that's the contamination of our material coverings, of our material bodies, of our material senses, of our wild, uncontrolled minds that flicker and jump all over the place with random ideas all the time. So through that filter, we see the light bulb, but we don't see the white, pure, clean white light, do we? Because we are looking through this filter of this coloured glass. So we can't even tell. I mean, it might look like a red light. You might think it's a red light. And then if we could take the red glass away, we'd see, oh, it's actually a white light. So we wouldn't know if it was red or green or blue or whatever colour, because we're forced to view that bulb through the glass covering. Now, if we put that onto our story, we've got the idea of our body, our behavior, our personality, our ego, our actions equate to the glass, to the covering, to the coloured covering. And the white light bulb equates to your pure, clean white, pure as the driven snow, no matter what, because no matter what coloured glass you put around a white light bulb, no matter what covering you put around a white light bulb, the bulb remains a white light bulb. So even Hitler had a pure, as clean as the driven snow, pure soul. Because it has to be, because it's a piece of God. It can be nothing else but pure. But obviously Hitler's lampshade was dreadfully distorted and filthy and dirty and who knows what colours, black probably. And so nobody could see that inside that covering there is that soul, and it remains pure. So we have to try to look at people past their lampshades, past their glass coverings. And you may think, gee, that's a terrible covering on that lampshade. I really hate that colour. That's just awful. What's coming out of that light, out of that lamp, it's just awful colour. I don't like it at all. It's very gloomy and dark and angry, or it's red light, or it's just not nice. And that's okay, because we don't have to like people's behaviours. We don't even have to like their personality. We don't have to love what they do, what they say, how they act, or their personality. What we're supposed to love is the part in them that is God, that is pure, that is the soul. And the soul is helpless, helplessly trapped inside that body, helplessly trapped and covered over in such a way that we don't even remember who we are, that we are that pure white soul. We become so tied up in the material world and conditioned by material existence that we just think the lampshade is the person. The lampshade is all there is. And we don't think about the pure white light that's the cause of the light that's coming out of that lamp. No matter how ugly that light may be, that lamp, that bulb is still pure. So really what my son told me is we should have compassion. We should have compassion for those pure souls that are trapped in these bodies of anger and these bodies of greed and these bodies of violence, entrapped by the ego, entrapped by the actions, behavior, personality, ego, and mind of that entity. It's just like I said in one of my previous talks, you've got the chariot, and inside the chariot you've got the passenger, which is the soul, and that chariot is running amok, and the soul has no control over it. Not even the driver of the chariot has control over it, because we tend to let the horses have control, which is our senses. Everything's about making ourselves, gratifying our senses. And so the horses, the 5 horses of the senses, they are running all over the place, and this chariot's jerking violently here, there, and everywhere, and the soul is in it and has no control. So unless we get the help of the scriptures, we don't know how to clean our glass. And if we don't manage to clean the glass on our lampshades, then our pure white light can't shine through. So that's what the scriptures are trying to help us to do, especially the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. The more one chants the holy names of the Lord, the more one cleans that coloured, filtering, ugly glass cover and makes it see through again, and so we can see the pure white soul. So when we see people doing horrible things, we don't have to love what they're doing. We just have to try to remember that inside that really ugly, filthy, dirty, dark lampshade, there is still a pure white light, and it is part of God. And therefore, we must love it if we want to love God. Otherwise, we're kidding ourselves if we think we do love God. So, yeah, distinguish between the lampshade and the actual light itself, the actual bulb. For me, that's a helpful thing to do. And have compassion for that soul, because it's really struggling to shine its light through all the coverings. Yeah, so I hope that was making sense. That was L for love one another. We must love one another. Could also have been L for light, now that I think about it. So next time we've got M, letter M. So I'll have a think about it. I'll come back to you on that. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hare Krishna, and God bless.